Let's get this party started. Good morning. Oh my God, we're almost 500, over 500 people. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, there we are. Boy, this echoes pretty weird. My name is Mike Adams. I'm part of the senior product staff at VMware, working on the vSphere product line. And for the next hour, I wanted to take you through vSphere 5. If you've been paying attention, and I know most of you have, we announced in July, and we started shipping vSphere 5 last week. So for many of you who are on support and subscription, you can go ahead and get your download of 5, as well as your license keys from the portal whenever you're ready to go. One of the things here is I will be providing this deck to you guys through the materials you get after the show, but I don't mind emails as well if you want to chat with me afterward. Don't laugh, this is my true email address, madams@vmware.com. Send me a note, and we can go ahead and have some type of correspondence. This is going to be pretty fast-paced. We're going to go through the technologies as best we can in the time that we have. But due to the content and just kind of the length of material that I have, what I'm going to do is hold Q&A till the end. And I'll make sure I stay around plenty. I'll also be down at the booth, so if you need to talk with me, we can definitely go ahead and do that. Disclaimer, I've been disclaimed. Just as a quick survey, and I actually realized my error yesterday when I was presenting because some people have actually already deployed vSphere 5. I just wanted to get a quick sense of where you guys are at in terms of deployment. So just a quick show of hands. How many folks have already deployed vSphere 5, either test and dev or in production? Okay, cool. How many folks plan, to the best of their knowledge, within the next 3 months they'll upgrade to vSphere 5? Okay, so it's usually about... Good. How many people within the next 3 to 6 months, roughly? Okay. 6 to 12 months? How many people are a year or more out for vSphere 5? Okay. And how many people just don't know? Okay. Honest, brave souls. Good. All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So, also want to tell you, I take feedback very seriously from this session, so definitely fill out the surveys. Let us know how we can better improve this. I've actually given the session on 4, 4.1, and now get the privilege to do 5 as kind of the general overview. But just wanted to show you how serious I take feedback. These were actual feedbacks from last year at VMworld. The room was cold, projector broke, but the session was good, so made sure the projector will not break this year. I had people tell me it was marketing last year. That's not the case this year. I think I made the mistake of putting the pricing and packaging slides into the deck last year. I've put that in the appendix this year. I learned my lesson there, so everybody won't get up and do that. And then the last one, my favorite, was, your session was good, but I could have gotten all this from the website. Now, let me tell you, I guarantee you cannot get this all from the website. And if you can, you're a more talented person than I. So anyway, you can judge for yourself. So let us know how we're doing. All right. So goals of today, give you the big features of vSphere 5. When you look at the release itself, there are about 192 new features and enhancements, okay? So in getting through all of that, you have to be able to whittle it down into the most salient and critical pieces for your business. And I'm going to give you some information around how to do that. But obviously, one of the things you're going to need after this is the release notes as well as the config maximum document. Config max telling you the configs and all the numbers that we have around the release itself. I'm going to light a fire under somebody in Palo Alto because I believe the config max is only available in French up on the website right now. It will be available in English very shortly. It should be up there already, so we'll get that going for you. We'll show you a quick demo of some of the storage capabilities. I do have a number of demos down at the booth, so if you need to see those again, please come down, or if you have trouble seeing the screen, some people have told us that, we can go ahead and have a more better viewing session down at the booth. And then I also want to give you some best practices, other important tips that I think are important around, how these things are going to relate to your environment. So when you go into testing or when you use them, you can think about those. I'm not going to provide heavy level of detail. We have a ton of other sessions that will go ahead and do that for you. And also, I'm not going to get into pricing, packaging, and licensing, as I stated before. I don't mind having conversations around VRAM, explaining the entire model to you. That's just fine, but we can do that in a different time and a different place. We also have other sessions on that as well. So, we're going to talk specifically about the cloud infrastructure, the pieces that come along with vSphere. I think many of you are very, very familiar with vSphere and have been for a long time. I just want to quickly touch on some of the other products in a very short time frame that are going to help you as you build and move toward the cloud. We basically think we have the right recipe for what the cloud infrastructure needs to be in order to make the larger hybrid public private clouds that you're maybe progressing toward. And then I'm going to get right into the meat where we talk about 4.1, we quickly change to 5, and then we get into each of the features and functions. We'll talk a little bit about ESXi Migration, just because that's an important thing to remember. Many of you probably know this, but ESXi is the only game in town with respect to the hypervisor architecture with the move to 5. So there are considerations there. And then I'll just give you some additional nuggets of information that I think are obviously important to remember. So here's the stack as we announced it. The Cloud Infrastructure Suite came out in early July from an announcement perspective, and we are going to, obviously, we've GA'd vSphere 5, and we'll be GAing some of these other technologies very, very quickly here coming up. And obviously, vSphere 5 is the major component down the bottom. But in addition to that, we also have added, and the only net new product that was announced at this time frame, the new vSphere storage appliance. And I thought Steve Harry did a great job yesterday explaining what that is. It's really targeted right now for an SMB or smaller type of installation, a 2 or 3 node config. Use the internal hard drives inside those servers to create the essence of a shared storage repository. And let those folks use HA and vMotion because they haven't been able to do that before because either they didn't understand how to set up a SAN or they couldn't afford to do that. So keep that in mind, and you can come talk to us at the booth about that technology as well. SRM5, new replication, as well as better failback. Also the new planned migration workflows. Get up into vCenter operations, which was already announced in Q1 of this year. Capacity, configuration management, alerting for vSphere. And then also the security technologies we have, vShield Edge, vShield App, as well as the Rev on vCloud Director. So each one of these was revved in a very significant way, and one of the most important things about these revs is that they do support vSphere 5 as well. So if you need these technologies in combination with vSphere, these are the versions you're going to want to have with vSphere 5. All right, let's get into what we came to talk about today. Here's where I left you last time we talked, okay? vSphere 4.1. And this slide and the next slide, I think, are good ways of, again, distilling information down into really important chunks, okay? I use this framework to actually explain vSphere in all of its glory. So if you have to explain to one of your colleagues or other people in your organization about vSphere, particularly if it's kind of feature-heavy, this would be the chart I would go ahead and do that with because it helps kind of break it into infrastructure pieces, you know, the pipes and plumbing. You move up to the app pieces, and then you can move up to the vCenter server components, okay? And last time I talked with you guys, we talked a lot on the bottom level around memory compression, the ability to now add another capability for any type of memory problem or a memory basically contention, where we were using, you know, transparent page sharing, we had ballooning, but after that you felt a swap and your performance went basically through the floor. So we introduced memory compression to give a more kind of balanced SLA so that we can actually make sure we have a certain service level that we guarantee we don't dip below. And then on the storage and the network side, we introduced the concepts of the I/O controls. This is one where Steve Harry likes to talk about the noisy neighbor problem. The idea, again, was that we could go ahead and prioritize, particularly across hosts, how we could actually say, you are more important than this other VM, and you get first dibs on the storage or network. Okay? The problem when that first came out, though, on the storage side was we didn't offer it for NFS-attached storage. That has been solved in 5. You'll see that in some of my slides. But the essence of I/O control was about giving an SLA characteristic into how we prioritize VMs over one another. Also in the storage area, we talked a lot about the APIs, the offload array integration technology that would allow us to move things like storage vMotion, creation of new virtual disks, to the array itself and not have to bog down the network or the server. Okay, it should improve performance 5x to 20x and also reduce that overhead. I've seen up to 95% reduction in overhead on the hit on the server and on the network because the array is the workhorse in the environment and vSphere stays out of the way in terms of specific operations. Up the top, I spent a lot of time talking to you about vMotion. vMotion was modified not only in terms of just its raw speed, but also in terms of the number of concurrent vMotions you could do between host pairs. So we bumped it from 2 to 8 if you were running in a 10 gigabit Ethernet environment. Even if you're in 1 gig, you should see up to 3 or 4 where you could move instead of just 2. And again, the raw speed would be better. And the last piece we talked about in 4 was the ability for us to scale, right? And scalability in this release was about how can we make vCenter Server more powerful and handle more VMs. And so we switched from the 32-bit platform to the 64-bit platform, and that gave us the scalability that we wanted. And so now, underneath one vCenter Server, you have the ability to have 10,000 VMs. Awesome. For many of you, thousands of VMs may not be a reality, but what I always think about in these large numbers, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the monster VMs, the idea is you don't want to just keep up with the Joneses, you want to exceed where the Joneses are at. I know that I'm going to be invested in this platform, so the platform better scale as I start to scale my business. And that's really the design goal behind a lot of these scalability numbers that we have. So let's fast forward into 5, use this same chart. And what you're seeing here in the Lego lock pieces in gray are the delta changes, the big delta changes for vSphere 5. And just to further differentiate, what I've done for you is I've actually bolded and underlined the biggest things that I think make this release kind of come to life and the biggest impact that I think certain capabilities are going to have for you. So we're going to talk across the bottom. We'll talk a little bit more about ESXi convergence. We'll also talk about auto-deploy, a better way of deploying new hosts, and also patching and updating those hosts. I won't be spending any time on this, but also just be aware the hardware version has gone from hardware version 7 to version 8. That gives us the ability of the monster VMs along with some other components that I'll just show you in a list a little bit later. But one of the things to keep in mind about the hardware version, the tools, and also the file system, you do not have to upgrade those in a single shot when you go to 5. In the past, you had to upgrade kind of all that en masse. Now we have backward compatibility, so you can move to the hardware version, you can move to the new tools, you can move to the new file system as you're ready to do that. Do more of a rolling upgrade rather than doing that all in one shot. Because you're dealing with other stuff like possibly a convergence to ESXi, you're dealing with just the upgrade itself, you're dealing with new VRAM models that you're trying to understand. There's lots of things that go into that, and so we're trying to make life easier for you as you go ahead and upgrade. Now, in the storage side, storage to me is the biggest area of focus for this release. And you're going to see a little bit later on when I show you the laundry list, storage is the biggest piece really of things that we worked on. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about storage DRS and also profile-driven storage, get into the weeds a little bit there. Also a little bit around the new API that is part of this. In addition to that, the file system has been modified from version 3 to version 5. Last time we went from version 2 to version 3, it was a very painful process. It was not a good way of going between file system versions. We've done our homework here and actually have a non-disruptive process to move you from VMFS 3 to VMFS 5. And you can read more about that. There are some restrictions and requirements around that, but the process should be greatly simplified, particularly in terms of what you've dealt with in the past. And then also down the bottom, we'll just quickly hit on the fact, obviously we have storage I/O control for NFS as well. Network was not a big focus when we came to market with vSphere 5, but if you actually look at it, there are a number of changes in the network space that are going to help, particularly the distributed switch, become what I call a big boy switch. So getting the span support, getting NetFlow, getting link layer discovery protocol, those types of things become and make distributed switch more of an enterprise class architecture. And then also in relation to that, if you're going to use the network I/O control, you have to be using distributed switch in order to do that. Okay? And the network I/O control prior to 5, it allowed you to do that prioritization I was talking about, but it did so at a flow level. So your flows were fault tolerance traffic or vMotion traffic or iSCSI traffic. And now this gets a little bit more granular where we give you a per VM control just like we do on the storage side. So that should definitely help. There will also be a release of the Nexus 1000V that is very forthcoming here. We also carry that depending on how you want to integrate your more advanced networking technology. One other just plug for the network side. Basically, the entire engineering team from VMware that works on networking is here. They're at that VXLAN booth inside the vSphere area of the VMware demo pod. So go ahead and see those guys to talk if you want to talk about more advanced networking topics. Up the top, we'll talk about the new backend architecture of HA called Fault Domain Manager, FDM. And then just to make you aware, vMotion has again been modified so that in the past when you called us and you asked us about latency with vMotion, we would have told you 5 milliseconds max for latency. Okay, so that basically made vMotion a line of sight tool. Don't go out the walls of your data center. However, many of you know, and probably in your testing and you've done this, it can handle a little bit more than that. Okay, so now what we've done is we've actually bumped up the official support to 10 milliseconds of latency. So what that should give you with vMotion is the start to metro or campus-style distance with vMotion. Okay, eventually we'll get into this long-distance vMotion concept. We're not quite there just yet, but this is a good start in order to get toward that. And the last piece on the right there, the Monster VMs, 32-way, 1 terabyte VM. And my next words out of my mouth are, God knows what you do with that at this point in time. But for some of you, that is becoming a reality. And then for others of you, again, remember what I said before about the scalability concept. You got to stay above where the Joneses are, right? You've got to continue to push above where people are so that they can grow as necessary. And really what this number represents for me is the ability for any business-critical app to now be put inside the virtualization layer. That's what you should be driving toward, and that's what we're going to continue to work with our customers on, putting any type of application inside the virtualization platform and getting the scale, getting the performance, and getting the protection that we need. Last piece up the top may be a little difficult to see from the back, but in relation to vCenter Server, 2 new choices that we'll talk about. The new web client that you have that will exist alongside the C# client or the VIC that you know today. And then also the choice of putting vCenter Server as a Linux-based appliance into the environment, something called the VCVA. All right, so again, use this chart to think about everything that's in 5, what are the big things in 5, and then also use this to update folks as necessary as to what's going on. So let's talk about these in a little detail. I don't think I'm going to spend too much time on this because I think a lot of people realize ESXi is the only game in town for the hypervisor architecture with 5. All right? And from the information that we've got, it seems like folks have gotten the message. Over the last couple of years in the release notes, we've put, hey, we're going to end of life one of the hypervisor architectures in favor of the other, and now is that time. Okay? And we really believe ESXi is a better way to go. It's smaller. It's a leaner, meaner, thinner architecture. Has a better security profile to it. Also will help you more expeditiously, get to patching and updating of systems. All right? For those of you who cannot, for whatever reason, move to ESXi in kind of a timely fashion, or there's something that blocks you from doing that, we do allow you to use ESX on the 4.1 edition up through May of 2014. So there's quite a little bit lifespan here where you can go ahead and get comfortable with ESXi over time. One thing also to be aware of, when you go ahead and do a conversion from ESX to ESXi, you can use the Update Manager to actually do that. It will not only move you from version to version, but it will handle a conversion from ESX to ESXi with 2 very important caveats. We don't migrate any agents that are in the COS. So backup agents, management agents, any of those agents that are in the COS, that will not happen because we use remote calls and SIM models to do those things now and interact with other vendors. And then also your scripts. It doesn't migrate your scripts, okay, as you probably guess. So just keep those in mind as you're thinking about how do I go through this transition to ESXi. But one of the things that helps, now that we have this architecture, we can do some really interesting things beyond just kind of the base level benefits that we get out of ESXi. And one of those really cool things is auto deploy. Okay? So one of the things we've been hearing from folks is, how can I actually deploy vSphere hosts in a more expedited fashion? Okay? I'm dealing with new applications that are rolling out. I'm thinking about cloud burst scenarios. I'm thinking about all sorts of things, but I've got to have some more speed around deploying a host. When I've talked to customers about deploying ESXi hosts, one of the things that consistently resonated, the best I've ever seen in terms of timing, is about 15 minutes. If you had all your scripts and all your ducks in a row, about 15 minutes, that's like world-class capability to deploy a host. Okay? For a majority of folks in this room, I'm guessing it would probably take you some time longer than 15 minutes in order to do this. Okay? And in a world where we're trying to keep up and be more proactive rather than reactive, is there a way we can actually improve on that? So what I've seen in testing the ability to do this, we can actually roll out a single host. We've done it in test in under 5 minutes. We've also rolled out configurations of 40 servers, 40 hosts. and that's kind of the max ceiling I would do concurrently at one time, in about just under 10 minutes. So again, the idea here is to make this as easy and expedited as possible, and also bring together a number of manual steps that you may have done before. Okay? So for the purposes of today in our graphic, I've merged some things together just to simplify the picture, because in the engineering diagrams you see FTP servers and DHCP services and all these other components, and it gets a little muddy in terms of the picture. What I've done up here is I've got a box up the top in green. It's going to be my vCenter server. It's also going to be where I'm running the auto-deploy virtual appliance. Okay, so you're going to need the auto-deploy virtual appliance up there, and you'd be running your vCenter server. You could split them apart. It's up to you. What you can see is there should be one concept in the white box that you're familiar with and one that you're not. So one that you are familiar with, host profiles. We know that host profiles helps us in terms of what are the network settings, storage settings, ACLs, and other information I want my host to actually have. The other side to it is what we call the image profile. That's the new piece. Okay, and this catchy name is what your ESXi images want to look like. Okay, and you can go ahead and create any number of images that you want based on the different types of boxes that you have, white box, any of the commercial vendors, and you would put that in that image repository. One of the cool things we've also done is there's a new image builder inside of vSphere 5. And what it allows you to do is do more customization of ESXi images. Take the use case where you have a driver that we don't necessarily offer up on our website, and you want to insert that driver into the ESXi image. You can do that now in vSphere 5, and that should give you some more flexibility and customization capability. But let's take the scenario here. I want to add a new host into this environment. I'm already running vSphere, and I want to add a new host because I want to use DRS to span my workload across those, or maybe I want to create new VMs on that host. So we bring up the host across the network. We're going to go ahead and gPXE it across that network using the image profile. So feed the profile to that ESXi box. At that point, it knows it's an ESXi box, but it doesn't know which vCenter server to join, and it also doesn't know some of those configuration details I was talking about before, network, storage, security, etc. That's where I'm going to feed it the host profile, and once I do that, it comes online, and we're ready to go. Now, in doing this, what's cool about it, number one, is obviously the deployment is a more simplified and expedited piece. But what's also interesting about this is that the patching and updating, the new model that I can actually introduce here becomes greatly simplified and tremendously faster as well. Because deployment is cool, but it's a one-time thing, right? What we're dealing with mostly on a lot of days is patching and updating systems. I get a new requirement and I need to update that system. So what I can do, if you're kind of paying attention here, you can actually see the image profile. If that's centrally located, I can actually make a change there, and anybody that's used that particular image, if I reboot the box down the bottom, I can go ahead and push out that new image on the fly to that particular server, or that group of servers that uses that image. So I can update those very, very quickly. Also, if I were to lose a box, basically because the personality isn't tied to that particular box, it doesn't matter because I can bring up another box very, very quickly and then go ahead and utilize that in a much more expedited fashion. So again, and really the key design principle behind there is when we load the ESXi image, we don't load it on disk. We actually load it in memory. And that's what gives us this kind of very flexible and dynamic capability for deploying these hosts and doing so in a very rapid fashion. So check this one out. I think it will help you in your operational model, not only around deployment, but also around patching of your systems. For those of you just from a license perspective, this is inside of Enterprise Plus only, so you'll need that level. If you don't have that level and you want to try this, and this actually goes for some of the new storage pieces as well, what I would do is I would go grab the eval for 60 days. It uses the Enterprise Plus key, and so you could go ahead and check this out and then obviously justify the scenario of going to Enterprise Plus if that's what you want to do. All right. Storage DRS. This, to me, is the biggest feature of vSphere 5 and the one that I think a lot of people are talking about. And from a very high level, I think many of you know DRS probably pretty well. But you know that DRS, the load balancing characteristic, it only applies to CPU and memory. Okay? Well, that's well and great, but how do I apply the concept of load balancing across storage? And that's where the emphasis of storage DRS has really been born. Okay? So the first piece that you're going to see here is a new object. That new object is called a data store cluster. And what we can do, first off, to help with the management of data stores is group data stores together. Okay? And in this case, you can see I've got 3 data stores, and I've grouped them together into one data store cluster. Okay? When you do this, best practice is to put like data stores together. Okay? And when I say like, you're going to see this in the demo, I mean like capacity and also other like capabilities, like similar RAID type. Okay? You're going to want to do that because otherwise, if you set up this mass kind of diversity between data stores in the data store cluster, you may have some behavior that you don't want, such as moving things too many times into maybe a piece of disk that's way smaller in terms of its capacity versus one of the other data stores in the cluster. So if I blow this open a little bit further, you can see that as I start to add virtual disks into the environment, I spread them out and balance them across the environment. Okay? And we do balancing in 2 ways. Number 1, space. Number 2, I/O load balancing. Okay? And hold your I/O load balancing thought that I know is in your head, which is, as soon as I say I/O load balancing, people automatically think about tiering and tiering within their frame. So hold that thought for just a second, because that's an important thing that I want to show you, and we can handle that use case as well. So in this scenario, you can see that I'm encountering a unbalanced scenario. The data store has an issue in the middle, and based on either I/O or space. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is either manually storage DRS can tell me that there's an issue that I need to fix, or I can put it in a fully automated mode to handle this. And when I do that, storage vMotion is going to actually be invoked, and I can move that virtual disk that's causing that imbalance problem to a different data store within that data store cluster. And there we go. Okay? In addition to that, just like what you know with DRS, there's a concept of affinity rules or anti-affinity rules. So if I create a virtual disk, 2 of them, that I want to make sure travel together for performance reasons, I can go ahead and make sure that that happens, number 1. It's put into the environment. But then again, if there's a scenario where I get unbalanced, I make sure that those virtual disks always travel together. Conversely, I can also do the opposite effect, which is, I've got 2 virtual disks. I want to make sure never come in contact with each other or may never be on the same data store. I can make sure that I push them in different directions. Now, the last thing that I think is really the time saver here and the best capability around this is the data store maintenance mode. Okay? Many of you probably use maintenance mode to evacuate VMs off a server, and then you can do whatever you want with that server for however long you want to do it, and there's no impact to your VMs. Same type of thing needs to happen in storage, right? If I need, on that bottom data store, to do a disruptive firmware upgrade, I have an array coming off of lease, I have to fix a bad performance layout, I can put that bottom data store in a data store maintenance mode, and then again invoke storage vMotion to go ahead and move those virtual disks from that data store up into other data stores within that cluster. Therefore, freeing it up to pull it off and do whatever I need to do, put it back in, and then I can rebalance across that. Okay? So again, I think a great way of providing these load balancing capabilities as well as the maintenance capability that you need inside the storage environment. Now, I said before, too, the I/O load balancing and the comparison or the piece that comes up in people's minds around auto-tiering. Okay? We can actually, within storage DRS, turn off the I/O load balancing. Okay? When you do that, you will go ahead and make storage DRS an initial placement tool and also a space balancing tool. Okay? Tell me about the space and where I should go ahead and put this virtual disk. And what you would do is you would rely on the frame to do the auto-tiering, and that's just fine. But the use case I want just you to consider for a second is if you have different types of frames within your environment, you may have different types of auto-tiering setups. So if that's the case, we're actually, regardless of disk array type, as long as it's on the HCL list, it will work. We're also regardless of protocol here. So fiber, iSCSI, NFS, doesn't matter. So if you had to set up auto-tiering more than one time, it would probably be a better approach to just set it up one time in here and use the I/O balancing feature within storage DRS in order to solve that particular challenge. But either way you want to go, that's fine. So we can support either use case. You want to use the auto-tiering in the frame, you want to use this technology for that balancing, it's up to you. One thing just to keep in mind too, when you turn on the I/O load balancing, it does turn on I/O control as well. So it will turn that off when you go ahead and undo that as well. So just keep that in mind. Last piece, and I'll show you here in just a second, this does also use a new API, which you don't necessarily have to use in order to use this feature, but it makes this feature even better because it explains to StorageDRS and vSphere in general what the array is capable of doing and what the array actually has in terms of characteristics. And I'll get more into that in just a second. Here's the second piece, profile-driven storage, which can be used by itself or could be used in conjunction with StorageDRS. The idea here, and I've created these tier groups just for demonstration purposes. You can create the names any way you like. But the idea is that if I have a VM, particularly a new VM that I'm creating, I want to better understand the type of storage that I want to put this VM on. And unfortunately, one of the things that sometimes happens is I may know a lot about the storage, but those folks that are creating a VM, which may be folks in different geographies or different departments, they may not have that same understanding. So it's likely and possible that they could make a mistake in terms of where they would put that VM in terms of its storage. So what I've done as the smart admin, I've gone ahead and said, okay, I'm going to offer high, medium, and low throughput thresholds. Someone can literally come in and from a drop-down list select high, medium, or low. When they do that, there's an association or a mapping from that request to where that VM is going to live in terms of its storage. So in this case, you can see in the graphic, if someone comes in and selects high, that says high I/O throughput up there on the top, what's going to happen is that VM storage is mapped to the tier 1 storage that we have. And that tier 1 could be anything that I wanted to put in there. If I had different array types, anything that I classify as kind of my highest end performance, I could put there. I could put a medium level in the middle, and then put maybe some slower disk in that other tier that I have. But again, it's about creating a grouping methodology to eliminate steps that you would normally have to go through in selecting these types of capabilities. The other piece that's important about this is the compliance angle. So if someone came in and all of a sudden their VM was living on the tier 1 disk as you had defined it, if someone decides maliciously or unintentionally to do a storage vMotion between tiers 1 and 2, we could actually flag that and say, by doing this, you're going to break the service level that you asked me to provide. So we would recommend against doing that. Okay, that's part of the kind of policy automation that we want to try to invoke in this type of capability. This is, again, another spot, too, where that API that I was talking about, feeding information around what these different pieces of storage are capable of. Because one of the things that people can see, actually, when they select high, medium, or low, they can see the class of service that they're actually going to get. They could see things like, hey, you're going to get snapshot, replication, dedupe, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've talked a little bit about this API, and I apologize for the naming conventions. Old names die hard, and acronyms seem to just pop out when we do these types of things. But basically, we're expanding on our storage API program. And we're using something called the Storage Awareness and Discovery API. Short name for it is VASA. And I'm pleased to announce these partners that you see on the right have told us that they're going to have solutions around this Storage Awareness API. They should be available in the next few months. And basically what ends up happening is literally the disk array sends us a string that says, hi, I'm the following disk array, and I can do snapshot, I can do replication, I can do dedupe, I am thick provisioned, I have a certain RAID level, it can send troubleshooting information. Just a better handshake between vSphere and these disk array types. Okay? Because otherwise we don't really understand what is that frame actually capable of doing. And if we can get that information, again, it makes us a better provider of how to utilize this storage and how to make us more efficient. Again, you don't have to utilize the API structure, but it definitely helps in terms of providing better efficiencies within the technology. The way this should work is on the vSphere side, you would have vSphere 5, and on the vendor side, usually what ends up happening is you would upgrade the firmware of the frame itself to the supported level where they have these tie-ins or hooks into the APIs. All right. Real quickly, wanted to show you some of the storage features that I just talked about in a demonstration. And I'm going to jump around here a little bit because we just don't have time to really kind of dilly-dally. So I want to make sure we see some of the core characteristics related to this. And the way we built this demo, we actually have all the storage features, including upgrade to VMFS 5, built in here. So come down to the booth if you want to see some more advanced capabilities around this. But as I go through here, one of the first things you're going to see right in the GUI is there's more information around the storage capabilities of vSphere 5. In fact, if you look down the bottom, let's see if I can get the laser pointer here. There we go. if you look down the bottom here, that's probably hard to see, there's a VM storage profile for the storage profile pieces. And then up the top, the data store has been modified up the top. So you see not only data stores, but also data store clusters. Okay, so that new object is up the top, that top row in the middle, and then the VM storage profile down toward the bottom and over to the right. And as I look to engage some of these technologies, one of the things you'll see here is here within the main GUI page is we have the storage capabilities of what we're seeing from the array. And in this particular case, the array has told us and fed us information that they are an array that has a RAID 10 setup. They also have replication services available. Okay, so again, more information tells me what's going on right from the GUI, and it's going to lead to a better result overall. So you're going to see here in just a second as I set up one of these profiles, you can see up the top here, I've already set up one profile that says bronze. I'm going to set up another profile that says gold. And when I do that, I can give it a name. And then you can see here are the different capabilities that the array has told us about. So again, I see RAID 10, I see RAID 1, I see RAID 5, and there's also some indication of which particular pieces of storage use replication and which ones don't. I realize it may be a little hard to see, but trust me, those are basically RAID levels first, and then some information around the replication. Okay? So that's going to help me build a better profile. And then if I kind of fast forward ahead here, when the user is going to go ahead and select some of these capabilities, you can see here's that drop-down list that I was talking about that says, okay, in this case, it's a bronze, gold, and maybe a platinum, but I could just as easily have that high, medium, and low concept that I talked about before. And that's where we could go ahead and select from some of those pieces. The last piece in the demo I wanted to show you was just to fast forward a little into storage DRS, so you can get a little flavor of that as well. So let's go ahead and go through this, and we'll get to the storage DRS piece. One other thing that's involved here is storage vMotion has also been modified to use, in addition to change block tracking, it uses something called mirror mode now to also increase the performance of how we move from one location to the next. So the performance of storage vMotion should be a lot faster inside of vSphere 5 as well. Okay, so I get up here, and here we go. So the first thing you'll see is that on my environment, I want to go ahead and create this new concept of a new data store cluster. I will go ahead and select that. You can see that up in the upper left-hand corner. Once I do that, I give it a name and also turn on storage DRS. And then I'm going to go through some classic selections like what I know with DRS, right? In the first case here, I'm going to select automation or no automation. So the manual mode or the automated setup of the tool itself. Now, best practice that I would recommend to you is when you first use this, use the non-automation mode or no automation mode. The reason for that is you need to not only give storage DRS some time to figure out what's going on, but you also want to see what's it actually going to do. What is it suggesting that I do? Don't put it in fully automated mode right away. Okay? The other side of that is you're going to want to give storage DRS somewhere between 8 and 16 hours to do an evaluation of what's going on and get a sense of what's going on. Also, unlike regular DRS, the possibility of moving things around, it's not going to happen, you're not going to want it to happen as fast as what DRS does, where it's constantly moving or could be constantly moving around VMs. When you're dealing with storage, you want to be a little bit more, I would say, conservative in how you actually move these things around. So the automation level, we'll go ahead and select that, and then we get into some further details. And up the top is here's what I was mentioning before around what the turn-off capability is for I/O. If you don't want to do the I/O load balancing, we can turn it off. And then you start to see some threshold pieces here around utilization and also I/O load, where I can dial the bars up or down. I also have a percentage up on space utilization, and then on the I/O characteristic, I have a latency threshold as well, which can be set to anything that you like. Some more advanced settings that I get into, looking at evaluating the I/O load in whatever window I want to look at. And also you see the bottom slider bar gets into how aggressive or conservative do I want to be in addressing an I/O load imbalance condition. Okay, so some choices there. I select which hosts and clusters I'm going to go ahead and use this data store cluster with. And then the most important piece starts to come into play here. What do I want to put in this data store cluster? Okay? And you remember before, if you're paying attention, I was saying put like stuff into a data store cluster. And so you see here in these 4 data stores that I have, maybe again a little bit difficult to see, but you can actually see one of them is close to a terabyte in size, There's a couple that are 3 terabyte and 4 terabyte respectively, and there's one that's very small in terms of the number of gigabytes that it has. I also get some information here from the system through the API around what we saw a little bit earlier, the RAID levels and the replication pieces. And I can go ahead and make an intelligent choice here around which things I want to put in this data store cluster. So, knowing what I know here, I'm going to put the 3 terabyte and that 4 terabyte data store into the same cluster, because not only are they like in size, but they're also like in RAID level, and also the fact that they have replication services. So I do that. And once I do that, I have my data store cluster, and I can go ahead and review all the settings that I've gone ahead and put into it. Okay? So just a helpful way of, again, reducing the management right from the get-go, and then dealing with I/O space balancing issues on the storage side. All right, let's go back to our presentation. And again, if you want to see that demo in more detail, come on down to the booth. Be happy to show it to you. Here's the piece around the I/O controls, network and storage. Again, introduced in 4.1, modified in 5. Now on the storage side, support NFS, in addition to fiber and iSCSI. On the network side, support the per VM controls instead of the flow type controls. And if you've never seen this in action before, it works pretty well, particularly in dealing with the cross-host problem where you have VMs that are accessing the same resources, but they're across hosts. So we can see that there may be a VM that is starving other VMs for resource. I always use the stupid example of, imagine the VM on the left is something that's mission critical to the business, and the VM on the right is accessing YouTube videos or MP3 files. We have a massive dispersion here in how important these VMs are to the business. Okay? So if this scenario happens, first thing I can do is I can actually level the playing field once I notice there's a problem here and give everybody equal share. This uses limits and shares, just like you're used to with CPU and memory. And then beyond that, what I can also do is I can actually give basically VIP status to the VM on the left and the one in the center if they are indeed more important than the VM on the right. Okay? And literally the way this works, I'm a little more familiar with the storage case. You set up the data store threshold. What do you want that latency that it's looking for in order to invoke I/O control? And then you set up at the VM level which VM is more priority than the other VMs that are there as well. Okay? So this can be a great way of helping this kind of SLA characteristic that we want to go ahead and set up. A couple of other points to remember. One of the things I really like about I/O controls is they stay dormant until they are actually needed. So if everybody's playing nice in terms of accessing resource, no need to invoke them, they just sit there. Okay? But once I violate that threshold, bang, that's where they go into play and start to alleviate these scenarios. On the network side, to use this feature, you have to have the distributed switch in place. Okay? So keep that in mind as well in order to make this happen in your environment. All right, last piece around the infrastructure, also based on hardware version 8, as well as just pushing the platform ahead. We've introduced better support for 3D graphics with Windows Aero, some better capabilities around USB 3 client connected instead of just host connected, some smart card reader support, as well as things like better differentiation or use of multi-core through the GUI. We've always been able to identify multi-core CPUs, but never really kind of chopped them up in the GUI, and we can go ahead and do that. I mentioned already the tools being backward compatible, so I don't need to upgrade them day one. And the last one that's kind of interesting, Mac OS X support as a guest, but it's very specific. It's Snow Leopard 10.6 running on Apple hardware. And what makes that really interesting is if you've been paying attention, Apple end-of-life their server hardware not too long ago. So we're working on this. It kind of is what it is at the moment. We'll be working on that probably even further as we go forward because we do realize some folks want to have that type of capability. All right, so that was a fast and furious look at the infrastructure service. Let's take a quick look at the application services as well. So on the app services side, again, larger VMs. Watch this, fancy graphic. Oh. So the ability now to create larger VMs 4 to 5x times. The previous limit was 8 vCPUs and up to 256 gigabytes or 55 gigabytes of VRAM. Now we can have that 32A up to a terabyte of VRAM in a single box or in a single VM. And again, really the driver here, larger VMs allowing you to get larger scale applications into the platform, really. That's really kind of a key point for us in terms of we accelerate the business critical applications. That's really the key driver here, more so than looking at this large number. The other side of that is performance and scale is very good. And in some of the performance that we've gotten out of VMs that are very large, we've actually been able to push over 1 million IOPS in terms of the performance. So you can see that obviously we're very serious about those large-scale business-critical applications, but we're also serious about availability. So the new backend to HA, we've moved from ADM to FDM, the Fault Domain Manager. What this allows us to do is it's a better process between the master and slave in terms of the election process. It happens a lot more quickly. We don't rely on DNS any further to do some of the heartbeating information and other details that we need. We've also consolidated some of the logging around HA. And really, the biggest thing for me is the more simplified setup that we offer. So if you were to add a new host into an HA cluster, in the past that could take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe longer. If you had to reconfigure the whole cluster, it could take you a long time. In the case where we add a new HA or a new host into an HA cluster, we can actually do that in under 2 minutes. And that's due to this new election process that we use. We can also provide better guarantees by using the storage interconnect as a better way of spotting false positives and understanding what's going on from an HA perspective. And then also, the scalability number hasn't gone up between 4.1 and 5. You can still do up to 32 hosts in an HA cluster. But the big key to me is a lot of people, and I bet you a lot of people in this room, they use 8-node HA clusters, right? And they do it for a variety of reasons. If I can go ahead and have a more simplified setup, it provides better guarantees and is more scalable, why don't I go ahead and increase the size of those 8-node HA clusters? At a very low cost, I can now provide HA to a larger number of machines and a larger number of VMs. So that's really the key driver for me. This has actually been tested well over 100 nodes in an HA configuration, but the official support is up to 32. But it does also set us up very well in case we want to move that 32 number in the very near future up to something higher. So keep that in mind. Check it out. I think this will be a major win for a lot of you in terms of providing, again, HA functionality to a larger number of hosts. Let's look at some additional features as we're kind of running low on time here. The vCenter Server Appliance. This is a SLES-based virtual appliance. So you can now deploy, you have your option of deploying vCenter Server on Windows like you always have as a Windows dedicated box. Some of you use a Windows VM. That's just fine. You also now have the choice of the vCenter Server appliance. Now, when you go ahead and deploy the appliance, a couple of things to just keep in mind. There will be some differentiation between what you see on the Linux side and what you see on the Windows side. First of all, the vCenter Server appliance does not support IPv6, so some of you may have an issue with that. The other piece to it is it does not work today in linked mode. So linked mode uses a concept called Atom, or a technology called Atom. That's a Windows-based technology. Atom doesn't exist in the Linux world. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well. Everything else should be on par with what you know on the Windows side of the house. So again, this gives you another choice for deployment. And you can deploy this as a virtual appliance, usually in a more rapid fashion, and everything else should be on par with the Windows equivalent that we have. One thing, it does also include an embedded database, just like on the Windows side. If you have a small configuration, you want to use the appliance, we do have an embedded database that will support up to 5 hosts and 50 VMs. Once you go beyond that threshold, you need an external database. Right now, and there's probably going to be a big groan after I say this, but the only external database that we support beyond that limit that I was talking about is Oracle. That will change over time, but that's kind of the way it is right now. So on the Windows side, you still have your Oracle and SQL servers. On this side, smaller scale installations has the small embedded DB2 database, and then the larger scale Oracle connection if you want to go ahead and scale it out. So just keep those things in mind as you're thinking about, do I want to deploy vCenter Server on Windows? Do I want to deploy it as a Linux virtual appliance? Just giving you more choices around being able to do this. Another choice that you have is the ability to use the new web client. As I said before, the C# client or the traditional VIC that you know is also still there in vSphere 5. But we've also added the web client for those folks that have a Mac or other types of devices that want to access vSphere and they don't have a Windows device, or they want to access from a different type of device, right? You saw Steve give some demonstration around our iPad capabilities. So in this, basically the core functions are all there. You will see a slight deviation between the web client and the VIC in that there are some bells and whistles and other tabs that won't be here inside the web client. And that was actually done by design. We want to give you time to actually get used to this web client and this more portal type of view. Usually when you change a GUI, it involves retraining folks, and it also involves updating documentation. So we want to make sure that as we move toward this model, particularly in the future, we set up a good experience. So again, I would go ahead and kick the tires on this, test it out. You have your traditional C# client that we've been using for a while. You have this now as well, and take a look at how this is going to function in your environment, and think about longer term. This could potentially become the primary interface into vSphere. And I think it sets up a good kind of portal type of view. We could also use this style of GUI to possibly branch out beyond just vSphere in and of itself. All right. Apologize for the next slide, but there's no other great way to do this. Kind of the best of the rest in the feature set. On the platform side, some additional capability around EFI, virtual BIOS, some memory fault isolation, and then you see some other networking characteristics, as well as, I wasn't kidding about the storage stuff, some additional capabilities of storage. One of the ones I think people are most interested in is the change that we've gone through in relation to the file system. It does allow us to have greater than 2 terabyte data stores. So there's some differences there. Make sure you read the release notes around that. Also, the VAAI, the Array Integration Offload Engine, now works with NFS as well. It also has a new thin provisioning capability that will allow thin provisioning to be offloaded again to the array frame. Up the top, we talked about vMotion already, but data recovery is also being modified. It has some new scheduling characteristics, new email reporting, better deduplication engine, and we've introduced a little bit more scale than it's had in the past. Last couple pieces, inventory extensibility inside of vCenter Server, so some better understanding of the different pieces and parts that you have inside of vCenter Server or running alongside it. And then also, just a reminder that there is an iPad client that we do offer that's free up on the Apple Store. We've offered that since about Q1, and you can go ahead and leverage that if you should see fit. All right. Just a couple of comments around ESXi Migration, now that we've gone through the feature set. Always a good idea to start with the info center that we have up on the web. That is a place we've stripped all the marketing fluff out of and put tech detail as to, okay, what's going to happen with my cost agents, what's going to happen with my scripts, how do I deal with that. The way to get to this is if you go to VMware.com, hit on the products, and on the right side after you select vSphere, there will be this list, and in that list is the info center. Okay, so good tech detail around what is going to happen in my environment with ESXi, how does it compare with ESX, and what are the things I really need to think about. If I think about this a little bit further, though, start the testing with ESXi if you haven't done so already. Many of you have already done that. Also, check in with your vendors around how they support ESXi. The good news is most of them already have been doing this for quite some time, so it's just important to double-check that. Also getting familiar with the remote management capabilities of ESXi, a little bit different setup in how you do it, but allowing the same type of functionality that you know. And then also the last piece, consider the migration to ESXi. You don't necessarily have to do it just in the frame of an upgrade. You could actually do it outside of an upgrade. So if I was going from, let's say, 3.5 to 4, I may consider in that process moving from ESX to ESXi in preparation for the future where I know ESXi is the only game in town, right? So I could do that kind of handling if I were doing a lower scale version, or if even within the same version, I just want to make sure I get to ESXi so I'm in a better spot in the future. So just keep these in mind. I think these are just good guidelines to kind of have in your head. Some additional nuggets for you. Upgrade Center, same like Info Center, hitting on vSphere and then going to the hyperlink on the right. This, again, has tech detail on how to go through upgrades. In this case, what's up there right now is the 4 to 5 upgrade. We also have archived information around a 3 to 4 upgrade. Also keep in mind, there is no jump upgrade possibility. If you want to go from 3 to 5, you do have to make a pit stop at 4. That's a good thing just to remember. Also remember in the upgrade, as long as you get vCenter Server to the highest level, get it to 5, you can go ahead and do rolling pockets of other hosts that are underneath that particular vCenter Server. So that, again, also gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of the versions that we have there. Just some other things to keep in mind. From a licensing perspective, we have end-of-life advanced. So any of you who have advanced licenses, you will be entitled to enterprise inside of vSphere 5. That's just something to be aware of. The other piece, too, is just from the naming conventions inside the product, in the tech docs, and also up on the web. You will see some slight naming conventions that have changed, and these have changed for the better. I've been trying to do this for 2 years, and I finally got my way, so this should hopefully help you. The terms that we use around vCompute, vStorage, and vNetwork, I've wiped those out so that basically we don't have these elongated names. There's no reason we needed to call the distributed switch the VMware vNetwork distributed switch. Let's just call it the distributed switch and be done with it. Okay, so we've done that across the product line. You'll see that in the tech docs and also in the GUI itself. One other slight deviation we've made is we've changed the feature pieces that are assigned to vSphere to a vSphere naming convention instead of a VMware naming convention. So instead of VMware fault tolerance, you would have vSphere fault tolerance. Again, just a slight change, but I know that every time we look at documents and GUIs, we expect to see a certain thing. And I just want to make sure that you understand we've made some slight changes there, hopefully for the better, that make things easier to use and easier to comprehend. All right. With that, what I want to do is have people that want to stay for Q&A come up to the microphones or push forward. Everybody else, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you. Okay, if you have a question, please come up to the microphone. Otherwise, I can't hear you, and more importantly, your other colleagues can't hear you.
Yeah, I got a question.
Let's go over here. Yep.
Is this on? Okay.
It is now.
Yeah, with the V client, the C# edition, you have a lot of partners that are developing plugins that they can access their products through that console. Now that we've introduced a Linux appliance as well as the web console, how will those plugins relate?
Yeah, we'll have the same opportunity to provide plugins in those cases, just like what we've done in the past, because we have the same API structures and kind of hooks into those pieces. So anticipate that the plugins will remain and be able to function in that new area as well as they've done in the past.
Thank you.
Over here.
What will the process be for moving from an existing vCenter to the vCenter appliance?
Yeah, I've gotten this a couple of times. Unfortunately, there's no transition process. There's no kind of nice, push-a-button, wizard-based capability. It's literally start with that appliance and then kind of build, and you'd have to kind of migrate things on your own in order to do that.
Thanks.
Yep.
I have advanced version, so I need to pay for the upgrades of support when I change to version 5?
No, you should. What's most likely happened is you've already purchased support. So you are entitled to go to the next version of the product, and that would be true for all the editions you currently have support on. So when you pay support, you get subscription, which is the upgrade of the version, and then you get the call-in support. So you will have, if you look in your portal, you'll be entitled to each of the editions that you have and the number of license keys that you have in the future.
No import is now is enterprise, no advanced.
That's right. So any advanced license would be automatically giving you enterprise with vSphere 5.
Okay, thanks.
With the loss of the agents in ESXi, we don't have the ability anymore to update the underlying firmware of the hardware, BIOS, backplane, whatever. So when is VMware going to add that capability? Because when I talk to our hardware vendor, they say they would be happy to do it, but they're waiting for VMware to add capabilities or APIs or whatever to allow them to be able to provide that functionality.
Okay, let's take that one offline. And why don't do you have a business card? Or I can give you my card. Okay. And we can go ahead and have that conversation. I need to check with a few folks on that. You know what, just send me an email. Send it madams@vmware.com, and I'll respond to it. Thank you. Let's take a couple more, and we're going to get kicked out of the room here, and then I'll stay around to talk to folks. Let's take two more.
Can you explain a little more on the NIC teaming multipathing capability?
Yeah, that one would probably be better explained by the networking team that's here, the engineering team. So if you just go to the booth and ask them about that, they can go ahead and help have some more detail on that. Okay. Last question, and then everybody can come forward too. We can talk a little bit more. I'm just going to take the mic off.
Does storage DRS support VMs with active snapshots?
It will, yes. So that's one of the updates to Storage vMotion in particular, so that Storage vMotion can work with VMs that have snapshots.
So they'll storage vMotion while they're running?
Yeah, they could do that, yes.
Good, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Good improvement.
Hey, thank you. All right, everybody come forward if you have other questions. I'm just going to take the mic off and we need to get out of the room.